Good morning, dear students. In this session, let us study the poem Obituary written by A K Ramanujan. The title of the poem Obituary, the word obituary means a notice of death in a newspaper including a brief biography. This poem Obituary describes the aftermath of a father's death and all the things he left behind, the things that are physical and emotional. In the poem, the poet explains how the death of his father has affected his family and what his father has achieved in his life. The poem addresses his father's death in different ways throughout the poem. The speaker of the poem sees his father as more human and less divine than he did before. The tone of the poem is mostly conversational and it is direct and quite ironical. Let us just go through the poem. You see, the poem begins with a conversational style. Father, when he passed on, left dust on a table of papers, left debts and daughters, a bedwetting grandson, named by the toss of a coin after him. A house that leaned slowly through our growing years on a bent coconut tree in the yard. Being the burning type, he burned properly at the cremation. Father, the speaker says, his father, when he passed away, when he died, he left only a few things behind. He left dust on the table of papers. Second, he left debts to be cleared by his son, and he left some unmarried daughters and a bedwetting grandson who was named by a toss of a coin after him. Generally, the child was named by the name of his forefathers. He also left behind a house that leaned slowly through our growing years on a bent coconut tree in the yard. Even the house that he left behind was also an old one. It was about to collapse. So he did not leave anything worthwhile to his son or to his inheritors. He says he was a burning type. He calls his father was a burning type. Burning type indicates he was a bad tempered man. The speaker very clearly tells us the nature of his father. He was a burning type man, means a high tempered, short tempered man. He burned properly at the cremation. When he died, his dead body was buried, not buried, it was burnt. It was burnt to ashes. He says it was burned properly. As before, easily at both ends, left his icons in the ashes that did not look one bit different. Several spinal discs, rough, some burnt to coal, for sons to pick gingerly and throw as the priest said, facing east where the three rivers met. He is burnt very easily from both the sides, except his two icons. Here icons signifies his anger or his greed for money. He left his icons in the ashes that did not look one bit different. Both eyes were almost the same. Several final discs, they were very rough, some burnt to coal, and later the left outs of his dead body were left out for his sons to pick very carefully and throw the ashes into the river. They were advised by the priest they have to pace east and throw the ashes of the dead body into the rivers so that they can send him to. So the poet very ironically says, humorously says, near the railway station. They, the railway station, we see the different railway tracks meet at the railway station. Similarly, the river meets at one particular spot where they are supposed to immerse the ashes of his father's dead body. No long-standing headstone with his full name and two dates. They were not able to engrave a headstone on the cremation ground of his father because he was burnt into ashes. Whenever we erect the headstones on the cremation ground, we find the full name of the person who died and two dates, particularly the date of birth and the date of his death. These two things are engraved. Name is the first thing that is engraved on the headstone. Next, we engrave the date of his birth, and date of his death. These things are not erected. The headstone was not erected. To hold in their parenthesis everything he did not quite manage to do himself. It is a common practice among the people to engrave all these things, whether they achieved them on their own or not, but these things are engraved. He could not manage anything. The poet very clearly says his father did not achieve anything worthwhile in his life. When he was alive, he did not achieve anything. Some things were beyond his control. He says, like a Caesarean birth, he was born in a Brahmin ghetto. Like a Caesarean birth, he was born in a Brahmin ghetto, Brahmin area, by Caesarean operation, and later he died by heart attack, by his heart failure in the fruit market. These two things are very ordinary, but these two things were beyond his control. So all these things are not engraved on the headstone. But someone told me he got two lines in an inside column of a Madras newspaper sold by the kilo exactly 4 weeks later. Street hawkers who sell it in turn to the small groceries where I buy salt, coriander, and jaggery in newspaper cones that I usually read. Further, the poet says, but someone told the poet that he got two lines in an inside column of a Madras newspaper. Even before his death, his father had sent a obituary note to a newspaper published in Madras. He had sent two obituary lines to be published in the newspaper. Later, that newspaper is sold by the kilo. It is sold. After 4 weeks of the publication, the newspaper becomes a waste paper. Generally, it is sold to the street hawkers. Later, the street hawkers sell the same newspaper to the grocery shops. The grocery shops make use of this newspaper to pack the things. Who sell it in turn to the small groceries where I buy salt. Generally, the speaker or the poet buys salt, coriander, jaggery, and other things in the grocery shop, where the grocery shop owner packs all these things in a newspaper, turns the newspaper into cones and packs all these things. Generally, the speaker or the poet reads these newspapers out of interest. He finds the obituary notes in the newspaper. He reads them for fun, not seriously, not emotionally. And lately, in the hope of finding those obituary lines, he made an attempt to find out the obituary lines got published by his father out of curiosity, not with emotions. So the poet says that he began to buy more of these things in the hope of finding these obituary lines which were written for his father. In the end, he says that his father left them with the changed mother, and he left us, the poet very clearly says us, a changed mother. He did not leave anything worthwhile or valuable to the family. When he died, he left only the changed mother. His mother became a widow. Such a woman was left behind. She remained sorrowful throughout her life, and more than one annual ritual. After the death of his father, the death day is celebrated as a ritual, an annual ritual. The poet shows his dislike for the ritual which is celebrated in the memory of his father. So the poet is not a very emotional, but very practically he speaks in the poem. Thus the poet says that his father achieved nothing in this world except these two lines which he got published in the form of obituary, which were written in the newspaper. He could never find out. Even though the poet tried to locate the newspaper, he could not locate the newspaper, but he was told by somebody that his father had got two lines published in a Madras newspaper. On the other hand, the speaker says he left an unbearable burden on the poet. The poet says his father, when he died, he left an unbearable burden on the poet. The son was not able to manage all the things that he had left behind. The poem is an critique of the poet's father and his capabilities. Thank you for listening. Let us see some multiple choice questions. Yes, the poet says, which one of the following was not left behind for the family by his father when he died? Dust on a table of papers and debts, unmarried daughters, a bedwetting grandson, a obituary note. He is an obituary note. Second one, which one of the following is an expression shows that the poet's father was bad-tempered man? Being the burning type, he did not quite manage to do himself. His Caesarean birth in a Brahmin ghetto, is a death by heart failure in the road market. The key is being the burning type. The tone of the speaker in the poem obituary is conversational, direct, quite ironical, all the above. The tone of the speaker in the poem obituary is all the above. It means conversational, direct, quite ironical. Two lines obituary was written for death of the speaker's father in an inside column of a Madras newspaper, Mysore newspaper, Bangalore newspaper, Chennai newspaper. Madras newspaper is the key. The word obituary means a notice of birth in a newspaper including a brief biography, death in a newspaper including a brief biography, a ritual in a newspaper including a brief biography, death celebration in a newspaper including a brief biography. The key, death in a newspaper including brief biography. Thank you for listening.